In this video you will learn how effective the berry attack is, and you will learn a bishop sacrifice that will allow you to obtain a winning attack. White begins the game by advancing with d4, placing a pawn in the center. Black answers with knight f6, developing his king's knight and taking control over the e4 square, to prevent white from occupying the center with his pawns. White plays knight f3, developing his king's knight towards its natural square and increasing control over the central squares. Black responded with g6, with the idea of developing the king's bishop towards the g7 square, where it will be very well placed, since it will occupy the large diagonal of dark squares and put pressure on the center. White played knight c3, developing his queen's knight and taking control of the e4 square. Now, white threatens to occupy the center with his pawns with the move e4. Black answered d5, placing a pawn in the center and taking control of the e4 square, to prevent the opponent from occupying the center with his pawns. Now, white cannot occupy the center with his pawns, since he cannot move his pawn to e4, as he did in the 150 attack. Therefore, white has to change plans and adapt to the new situation. So white played bishop f4, developing his queen bishop to a good square. The bishop on f4 is very well placed, as it points directly against the c7 pawn. So, at some point white could play knight b5, attacking that pawn. For example, now it would be a serious mistake knight to c6, since white responds with knight b5 and is winning. Black played bishop g7, developing the king's bishop and preparing to castle. e3. White connects his pawns, reinforces the defense of the d4 pawn and at the same time allows the development of the king's bishop. Black castled. White played bishop e2, completing the development of his minor pieces. The white bishop is very well placed on e2, as it points towards the h5 point. White's plan is to castle on the queenside, take his knight to the e5 square and then advance with h4 and h5, to attack on the kingside. Black played b6, with the idea of preparing the counterattack in the center with c5. White responded by knight e5, placing the knight on a strong square in the center and aiming for the c6 square, which is a weak point in the opponent's position. At the same time, the action is released to the bishop on e2, which points directly towards the h5 point. So white is now prepared to advance with h4 and h5 and attack on the kingside. The game followed bishop b7, developing the queen's bishop and increasing control over the c6 square, to avoid any possible invasion of the enemy pieces. White answered h4, beginning to advance his pawns on the kingside. His plan is to continue with h5, then capture on g6 and open the h-file for the attack. Black responded with h6, with the idea of being able to respond with g5 and keep the game close in case the white pawn advances to h5. White played h5, continuing his attack on the kingside. Black answered g5, with the idea of keeping the game close and trying to avoid the possible attack of the opponent. Now the white bishop is attacked and seems to have to retreat. But white played bishop takes g5, a very good move. White sacrifices his bishop with the idea of completely destroying the defenses of the enemy king. The game continued. H takes g5. White answered h6, attacking the bishop on g7. White has a decisive attack. It is not possible to return the piece with bishop takes h6. Since after rook takes h6. King g7. Rook h3. The open file allows white to obtain a decisive attack. For example, in the case of rook h8, with the idea of changing the rooks and relieving the pressure. White plays bishop h5, attacking the f7 pawn. After knight takes h5. Rook takes h5. Rook takes h5. Queen takes h5. The black king will not resist many more moves. Or in case of f6, then follows queen d3. After f takes e5. Rook takes g5 check. King f8. Queen g6 and white wins. Or if after the move rook h3 black plays knight e4. White responds knight takes e4. And after d takes e4. White plays bishop c4, attacking the f7 pawn and freeing the way to take the queen to the kingside. White is winning. For example, in case of bishop c8, attacking the white rook. White continues rook h7 check. And after king takes h7. White plays queen h5 check. King g7. Queen takes g5 check. King h7. White castles on the queenside and the black king will not escape mate. In the game, after the move h6, black played bishop h8, removing his bishop to prevent it from being captured. White answered h7 check. Now it is not possible to capture the pawn, because after bishop a6 white attacks the bishop on b7 and at the same time frees the way to take the queen towards the h5 square. White wins. For example, in case of bishop take a6. Then queen h5, and checkmate is near. For example, in case of knight f6, then queen takes h8 is checkmate. Or in case of rook e8, white continues queen takes f7 checkmate. If black plays bishop c8, to defend the bishop, white plays queen h5, threatening checkmate. After bishop f5, to avoid mate. White plays bishop d3, to eliminate the enemy bishop. After queen c8, to defend the bishop. White continues with knight g6, blocking the action of the enemy bishop and threatening to give checkmate. Black is helpless, since after bishop takes g6, white plays bishop takes g6. And after f takes g6. Queen takes h7 is checkmate. In the game, after h7 check, black played king g7. Now the black pieces have lost their coordination and the bishop on h8 is completely out of play. White only needs to move his queen to the h-file to checkmate the opposing king. White played bishop d3, with the idea of clearing the way to take the queen towards the h-file and be able to checkmate the opponent's king. Black played bishop a6, with the idea of changing the light square bishops to get rid of his bad bishop and eliminate an important piece in the attack. White answered queen f3, with the idea of moving the queen to the h-file to checkmate the enemy king. The game continued bishop takes d3. C takes d3. Now it would not be possible queen to c8, to prevent the white queen from going to the h3 square. Because white plays knight takes d5. And after knight takes d5. White plays queen h5 threatening to give checkmate. After queen e6, to prevent mate, white plays queen takes g5 check, and black has to give up his queen. In the game, after c takes d3, black played queen d6, with the idea of taking the queen to the kingside to try to defend his king. White played queen f5, threatening to capture the g5 pawn. If black now plays knight e4, to defend the g5 pawn, white plays knight takes e4. And after d takes e4. White plays rook h5 and black cannot prevent the checkmate. In the game black played rook d8 to try to escape with his king. White answered queen takes g5 check. King f8. Now, white played king e2, with the idea of freeing the first rank and being able to incorporate the two rooks into the attack. If black makes the move queen b4, to attack the b2 pawn, can simply reply with knight d1 or rook b1 to defend the b2 pawn and black gets nothing. In the game black played a6. White responded with rook h6, invading with the rook on the 6th rank and preparing to double the rooks on the h-file. Black played knight b to d7. Now, it was very strong rook g6, threatening rook g8 check and white is winning. For example, after f takes g6. White plays queen h6 check and white wins in all variations. In the game, white played rook a to h1, incorporating the queen-rook into the attack on the kingside. Black played queen e6, with the idea of exchanging on e5 and then giving check with his queen on the g4 square, to try to exchange queens and repel the attack. White played rook 1 to h4, taking control over the g4 square, to prevent the queens from being exchanged. The game continued knight takes e5. D takes e5. Now the black knight cannot move because it would still queen g8 checkmate. King e8, trying to escape with the king towards the queenside, to try to put it in a safer place. White played e takes f6, capturing the opponent's knight. White has already recovered the piece and continues with his attack. The game continued e takes f6. Queen g3, attacking the c7 pawn. Now, it is not possible king to d7, to defend the pawn. Since white plays knight takes d5 and queen takes d5 is not possible, because white plays rook d4, pinning the opposing queen and white wins. In the game, black played king e7. White replied queen takes c7 check. Rook d7. Queen g3. Rook c8. And black resigned the game without waiting for the response since white has two extra pawns and his attack continues. So black has no hope of saving the game. In this video we have learned a bishop sacrifice to continue advancing with the h-file pawn, which left the opposing pieces very uncoordinated and allowed white to obtain a decisive attack.